Welcome back to the Play Action Podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing it all, talking about the playoff. The rankings came out this last Sunday. Very controversial, a lot to talk about there. We're going to kind of recap the conference championship games. Don't know how much we'll talk about there, but might talk a little bit about the impacts that they had on the playoff, and then the transfer portal's open. A lot of players entering their name in the portal. Yeah. Might discuss a little bit about them. Probably won't do too much transfer portal stuff, but I think we're going to mostly talk about this playoff. What were your thoughts when you saw that fourth and fifth team get announced in the playoff?
Dude, I was disappointed. I mean, I think I don't know if most of the country was shocked or if most of the country was kind of expecting it to happen, but they didn't know that the committee had the balls to be able to, leave out a 13-0 Power 5 conference champion for the first time ever. But yeah, I was shocked. I was sad, and I was devastated for the Florida State players, fans, staff, everyone, because they 100% deserve to get in regardless of, the fact that Jordan Travis had the injury and he would not be participating in those games if they did make it. But I mean, I think it's a tragedy. I think that they 100% deserve to get in. And I think it's, a call on the committee to be more transparent with, why they're making these decisions and, why they made that decision, because it seems like we don't have much of an answer as to why that happened. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah. And my whole problem with the whole decision was it was weird how Florida State, even after Jordan Travis went down, if they're going to ding Jordan Travis and Florida State for not being as good of a team, why didn't they do that the week it happened? Why did they keep them? They kept them I think they kept them at 4 for the next, 2 weeks, and then decided that after the conference championship game that they were just no longer one of the best 4 teams, which is my biggest problem with it, because it seems like the committee is afraid to drop teams and move teams up very aggressively. Kind of my main example is Alabama. Alabama wasn't the 8th best team going into conference championship weekend, and I'm okay admitting that. I think that Ohio State probably should have had a farther drop. I think they should have been looking at maybe like the 8th spot, because then you have Oregon at 5, Texas at 6, and Alabama at 7. And you can justify moving those 3 teams 3 spots up or less because of, things that might happen in conference championship week, which was my biggest problem, because you have Florida State sitting there at 4. So basically the way I look at it is you're telling Florida State, you're telling their fans, you're telling their players, you're telling everybody involved with that university, if you win your conference championship game, you are in. Yeah, exactly.
And that's our mindset going into the games, and there's just no consistency week to week. It's like they're too scared to be able to, make that change in the rankings before conference championship weekend. But now, after conference championship weekend is over, now we're going to make that significant change. I feel like it should be, the same through the entire season, week to week, so that these teams have an idea of like where they're sitting at. So I don't like the inconsistency at all.
Well, yeah. And the easiest thing they could have done is moved everybody up a spot and move Florida State back in between Texas and Alabama. Because if it goes Texas 6, Florida State 7, Alabama 8, or even like I was mentioning earlier with Ohio State farther down, and it goes, Texas 5, Florida State 6, and Alabama 7, then it's actually comparable. You're like, maybe Alabama getting a win over the number 1 team in the nation in the conference championship game is reasonable enough to jump them over Florida State for that 4 spot, but having the 8th team in the nation jump the 4th team in the nation to get into the playoff it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense at all.
It doesn't make sense at all. So do you think the committee got it right, in your opinion?
See, and that's another thing I really struggle with, because the committee preaches that they pick the best 4 teams in the country. They've never picked the best 4 teams in the country. Like people argue all the time, Yeah, they always get the best 4 teams in the country. No, they don't. You can't tell me.
TCU last year.
Yeah, especially with TCU last year. That's a great example. But even this year, it's like, can you tell me that Georgia is not the favorite going into the game against Washington or Texas?
Yeah.
Like, Georgia would be the favorite in those games. Is Ohio State favored against Ohio State or Texas? I could see it. I'm not saying they would be, but I could definitely see it. And that's kind of what I go back to with the difference between the best 4 and the most, deserving. For me, it's always been the 4 most deserving.
Absolutely.
Because
that's how it should be.
Because I think it should be the best 4 teams. So I'm not like against them picking the best 4 teams, but my problem with it is they justify picking the 4 most deserving teams as the 4 best teams. And it's just the easiest way for them to justify it when it just couldn't be more wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Because of, previous years, we've seen it multiple times. There's been tons of blowouts in those semifinal games, which is like, okay, we're the 4 best teams not in there. So it was just confusing to see it change this year. And man, I hate that. Like, the most entitled thing to say is just like, it should be the 4 best teams. It's like, no, it's the 4 most deserving teams. If you're one of the best teams in the country, you should be able to go out there and, make a case for yourself, and you shouldn't have an issue getting in the playoff. But, to be able to pull that card after a loss, especially, Kirby Smart, making those comments after his loss against Alabama, it just seems like an entitled thing to say when it's, instead of just being like, it's up to the committee, the 4 most deserving teams should get in there. And, obviously that wasn't the case this year. So, I mean, I'm just very disappointed in the committee, and it's a sad day for college football. It was.
Well, yeah. And I think I'm mostly just disappointed in the precedent that it sets. Can you tell me, like, people can tell me all they want that a Jordan, Travis, Liss, Florida State team is not as good as the other 3 teams. I can get behind that. I get what you're saying. But you're telling a team that went 12-0, won their conference championship, went 13-0, did not lose a game. You're telling me that that team is not deserving of a spot in the playoff because their quarterback's injured? Because then that makes me think Jordan Travis should be the Heisman then.
Yeah, exactly.
If he's so important, if he's so important to this team that him going down makes them not a playoff team anymore, then he's the Heisman favorite. He has to be.
Absolutely.
So
And do you think that they do this with any other team? Say JJ McCarthy goes down for the conference championship, and then they go out and they still win. Are they going to be excluded from the playoff? Absolutely not, because it's Michigan. Same with Alabama. Say they didn't lose Texas earlier this year, and then they still win their conference championship, but without, Milroe. Are they going to be excluded? Absolutely not. So I just don't appreciate the bias, and it's sad it's honestly so sad to see.
Yeah, and I even asked Kirk Herbstreit. He was talking about why Florida State was left out for Alabama. And I didn't expect him to respond or anything, but I put in his comments, and it actually got quite a bit of traction, a bit of likes. I just said, like, hey, Kirk, if Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, or Alabama are 13-0 and their quarterback goes down, do they make the playoff? Like, yes or no? And people were bringing up the example of a 3rd string quarterback in 2014 at Ohio State in Cardell Jones, and I think that was before JT Barrett, or JT Barrett was 2nd string, and then Cardell Jones was the 3rd string. Obviously a little bit different situations because they blew out Wisconsin in their conference championship game, like 59-0 or something like that.
Yeah.
But that team was awarded a spot in the playoff over TCU and Baylor, I believe, who didn't play a conference championship game. And look at how it ended up. Ohio State ends up running the table. They beat Alabama, and then they beat Oregon in the national championship game. So, like, I can get behind the sentiment that Florida State is not one of the best 4 teams without Jordan Travis. They just haven't looked like the same team. I can get behind that. Like I get it. I watched the games.
Yeah.
I watched them play against Florida. I watched them play against Louisville. It's definitely not the same team. But to say that team doesn't deserve a shot after going 11-0, beating, LSU, they beat Clemson on the road, which is not a tough game to play. They beat Duke, and, they beat Miami. It's like, it's not like they beat up on a really poor schedule. They beat a lot of quality teams on the way. And I think they should get their shot to at least prove that they deserve that spot. If they go out and say get blown out by Michigan in the Rose Bowl, then, maybe it's a different conversation down the line. But I just think they deserve their shot to at least go out there and they would have, people are also forgetting about this. They'd have a whole month to prepare for Michigan in the Rose Bowl. So they have a whole month to sit down with hopefully what would be Tate Rodemaker. He didn't play on Saturday, but I think the expectation is he'd play in the bowl game. Sit down with him, get him prepared, have him watch a bunch of film, get a game plan in place of what you think you can do to beat Michigan, and, go at it.
Yeah, and let's not forget, the 2 SEC teams that they played this year. They beat LSU in the neutral site, which both the games were away from their home field. I know it was the neutral site against LSU at the beginning of the year. Beat them. Obviously, it was with Jordan Travis. They go to the Swamp with backup quarterback and beat them as well in a hostile environment. And then obviously, beating Louisville, top 15 in the country, with their backup as well. I'm just dumbfounded. And I think that's our take on it. We could ramble all day about, how we don't agree with the decision, but the decision has been made. And I think that the committee is definitely going to be some Georgia Bulldog fans, because if Florida State goes out there and beats Georgia in that bowl game, then it's going to be, all hell is going to break loose, because that fan base is going to be even more angry. They might claim themselves as national champions at that point.
See, and that's another good conversation too. If Florida State does go out and handles Georgia, they got to beat them.
Oh yeah,
they got to beat them like 35-42 to like 14 or something like that. But if they go out and they dominate Georgia at 14-0, I can 100% get behind claiming that national championship.
Oh yeah.
Like when UCF did it, like it's just not the same, because they don't play that Power 5 conference schedule. But with Florida State, if they went out and claimed the national championship, I'd be right there behind them. I'd say, yep.
Oh yeah.
100%. That is our national championship.
They would have beaten 3 SEC teams, all either neutral sites or on the road. And then obviously Clemson, Notre Dame, Louisville. I would claim myself as a national champion at that point. Absolutely. So, let's kind of move past that, because obviously that was our take on what the committee had to say or who they picked. But, let's talk about the actual matchups and which ones, which matchup are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think it's easy to say that the matchup everyone's looking forward to is Michigan, Alabama. As much as I don't agree with Alabama getting in over Florida State, I do think Alabama is one of the best 4 teams in the country. They're just playing at a level right now that it's the Alabama standard. It's what we kind of expected them to be at the start of the season. That's why when they went down and played Texas at home in Tuscaloosa and lost, it was so surprising, because it's like, this is not Alabama. That didn't look like Alabama that day. That looked like, just any other SEC team, at home. And it was really puzzling and really weird, because, we even talked a little bit about Alabama's dynasty just being over. Like, is Nick Saban past it? Is he not the same guy that he used to be? And it's very intriguing to see the development, because Nick Saban's known as a guy who gets all the 5 stars and all the 4 stars. And I think that kind of goes past his development of players a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, he really does develop players, and we've seen it, especially with Jalen Milroe throughout the season. He's become a really, really good quarterback. And if he's playing, I know he claimed the Heisman after the Auburn game, which I don't necessarily agree with, but if he plays at that level for, 13 games, I think he'd be in the Heisman race. I do. I really do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, single-handedly saved the season with what was it, 4th and 30 something?
Yeah,
ridiculous play.
4th and forever, yeah.
I mean, ridiculous play. If he doesn't pull that off, they're definitely not in the playoff right now. But he did, and they're going to play Michigan in the Rose Bowl, which should be a great matchup. On the other side, Washington, Texas. It's going to be a rematch from the Alamo Bowl last year, and it was a great game. What are you seeing from there?
Yeah, this is, I think, something that's been kind of lost in the whole Florida State, Alabama talk is Washington probably deserves to be the number 1 team in the nation. They have 2 wins over the committee's number 8 team in the nation, along with beating Oregon State, who is ranked in the top 20 in the nation as well. They beat Arizona on the road, who's number 14 in the committee's rankings as well. So they have 4 top 20 wins. Michigan only has 2? They beat Penn State and Ohio State. So I think that's the conversation that nobody's having is Washington deserves to be the number 1 team in the nation and play in the Rose Bowl. But instead, they're going to have to travel across the country to Louisiana and play in the Sugar Bowl against Texas in what is going to be a really electric matchup, I think, because they both play really, really well against their opponents' weaknesses per se. I'd say probably if you look at Texas, one of their biggest weaknesses is their secondary. And that's Washington's strength is those wide receivers and Michael Penix throwing the ball around. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup. And then on the other side, I think, Texas is really physical on the lines and they like to run the ball and be the aggressor. And, that's not necessarily the way that Washington can win. They can win that way, but it's not how they want to win. So it's going to be an interesting game. I think that one's probably going to be the potential to really go one way or the other. I think it could be a blowout one way. Whether Michael Penix and those receivers really get going or whether that run game for Texas really gets going. I think it could be one of those games where, after the third quarter, we're all turning it off because, one team's up by 30, but the matchups are really, really great. And I think that is one of the positives to the whole fiasco of who should get in, who shouldn't get in is there really are 2 really good matchups that are going to be really fun to watch on New Year's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And think about it. This is 2 teams between Washington and Texas who don't make it every single year. Unlike Alabama and Michigan, these are teams that have been waiting for a while. I think Washington made it back in 2016. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, correct.
2016, and I don't think Texas has made it, have they?
They have not made it, no.
Texas has not made it. So, a team with 1 appearance, a team with no appearances. So both these teams, new to the scene and, hungry to be able to make it to the national championship. And I think that, it would have been appropriate if the 12-team playoff would have came this year because that would have made things more interesting. And obviously Florida State would be in there and would probably have a bye. Would they have a bye?
No, they would.
I guess they wouldn't.
They'd be matched up against Liberty at home.
That's right.
So
they'd have the home game against Liberty because they're not one of the top 4 teams that are conference champions. That's how it's going to work, right? It'll be the top 4 conference champions in the rankings. We'll get that bye. Well, and then just looking at that, it also gives us more intriguing, those home games in that first round. Those are some matchups. And I think that they would have been matched up within conferences from what I was seeing.
No, yeah. And actually, now that I think of it, you are right. Because with the Pac-12 no longer having a automatic bid, Florida State would have that first round bye next year. They would have been in the top 4. So they would have not had to play week 1. But yeah, there would be some fascinating matchups. Like you're looking at, Oregon and Missouri playing each other and up in Eugene. You have Ohio State playing against Ole Miss, I want to say. Penn State. Penn State, that's right. So a rematch of what was a great game, earlier this year, which would be interesting too. Is there a scenario where Ole Miss jumps ahead of Penn State just so they don't have that repeat matchup? I think that's potentially a scenario. So
yeah, I'm wondering if, how the rankings are going to work in future. Are they going to tweak certain things so they don't get first round in conference matchups? Or are they just going to kind of stick to traditional rankings? And that's something they should make clear, at the beginning of the season.
Well, and what's interesting too is somebody pointed out that 10 of the 12 teams in the playoff next year are from either the SEC or the Big Ten. So
yeah.
That's a real kind of step forward towards that power two, I guess is what we're calling it.
Yeah, the power two.
Because if you think, Florida State, the way that they were treated this year, I'm sure they're looking to get out and get to either the Big Ten or the SEC. So
SEC, oh yeah.
It could be interesting. You could have a full slate of teams that are from, either two conferences besides the conference champions for the ACC and the Big 12.
Yeah. Yeah. So, a lot of changes starting next year. The SEC, they're done with CBS. Obviously the Pac-12 is falling apart or has fallen apart. And, give us an update on that. Are they gonna bring teams into the Pac-12?
Yeah.
Or is the conference just gonna fade away?
So it sounds like they're gonna try to keep it going. They announced a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West. So last I heard, their schedule is gonna look like Oregon State and Washington State are gonna play each other home and away, I believe.
Oh, really?
I think they're gonna play twice. Yeah. And then
wow.
They have 7 Mountain West games, I believe, that they're going to play. And then they'll schedule 4 non-conference games. So, or three non-conference games, my bad. So
Interesting. See, I didn't even know that, so I appreciate the update.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that fully looks.
Yeah.
We should be getting the SEC schedules here too in the next couple of weeks. So that'd be interesting to see kind of where those games are lined up. We know who they're playing, but we don't necessarily know how they're lined up. So that'll be interesting to see, those come out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's wrap things up with one more topic. Let's talk about, the Heisman finalists that just came out. We've got Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., and then Marvin Harrison the third. Do you agree with these finalists? And if so, what's your prediction for what's going to happen in New York this year?
Yeah. I think they did a great job. Probably the most controversial one is Marvin Harrison, because there's receivers like Rome Odunze and Troy Franklin, and even Malik Neighbors down in LSU that they've all had great seasons, as wide receivers. I think just the main difference is you look at those 3 guys, all 3 of their quarterbacks are Heisman finalists. Whereas, yeah,
exactly. So I was wondering if they didn't want to have like repeated players from teams and repeated teams.
Yeah, even that, or I just think Marvin Harrison was at such a disadvantage with Kyle McCord, who's now in the portal. That the fact that he still put up similar numbers to those guys is really a testament to what that wide receiver is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So who do you see winning it this year out of those 4?
Yeah, it's definitely much more of a conversation than it was a week ago. I thought Bo Nix had it for the most part wrapped up. I thought it was going to be Bo Nix's award. Yeah. Then he goes and plays not so spectacular down in the Pac-12 championship game. He threw that really, really bad interception that was right after Michael Penix threw an interception. So I think ultimately Michael Penix and Bo Nix took themselves out of the Heisman race, because they both kind of, one didn't really surpass the other, in my opinion. And I think we saw that with Vegas odds too, with Jaden Daniels being the new favorite.
Yeah.
So I think it will be Jaden Daniels. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on a 3-loss player potentially getting the Heisman. Should Jaden Daniels be affected because his defense wasn't so great and kind of lost him some of those games?
It really just depends on the criteria of the voters for the Heisman, because are we looking at, overall performance? Are we looking for, players going out there and making the biggest impact for his team and winning football games and, advancing to the playoffs? Because obviously Jaden Daniels, his stats are there. He has stats lined up with Joe Burrow back in that magical 2019 season. So, that's not the question. The question might be, should he be discredited because of the performance of the team around him? And I think he should win. I think he should win, in my opinion. I think that Vegas has it right. When it comes to the odds, they know something, and I see Jaden Daniels winning it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. It's the Heisman really is an individual award. I'm sure team accolades always help. But it is very crazy to me to hear Jaden Daniels talked about with the Heisman, because I watched him play at Arizona State a couple years ago in the Pac-12 conference, and I just didn't think this guy was even a quarterback at this level. I didn't think he could play at this level, and he sure has really developed at LSU. Do we need to start talking about LSU as a elite quarterback development university?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Got, Joe Burrow now and now Jaden Daniels. It's pretty impressive what they've been able to do.
Yeah. Just got to get that defense firing, and we'll take them seriously again, because that 2019 team was unbelievable. Yeah. So, but the quarterback development is great. So we both got Jaden Daniels, correct?
Yeah. I think if you would have asked me a week ago, I probably would have gone with Bo Nix, but I think I'm leaning towards Jaden Daniels now.
You think that billboard planted in Vegas got to the heads of Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr.?
It definitely got to the heads of the fans. I heard more things about that billboard from Oregon fans than I would have ever thought. So I don't know. Maybe it did.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think is that going to wrap things up for us?
Yeah, I think that kind of covers our thoughts of the playoffs. We'll probably be talking about bowl games pretty sporadically through the bowl season, and then leading up to eventually the 4 playoff games.
Yeah, it's kind of weird doing a remote.
2 playoff games.
We had to slow things down. I tore my ACL, so not even playing football, just covered football. I tore my ACL, so it slowed things down for us. But we figured out how to do things remotely, so we'll be doing this for the next coming weeks, and they'll pump out some content for you guys. Also, follow Brock on Twitter. I mean, he's been killing it at Play Action Pods. Is that what the Twitter is?
Yeah, Play Action Pods.
Yeah, he's been covering a lot there, and you can interact with him on there. And then the other socials is at the Play Action Pods. So we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll be covering here in the next coming weeks for bowl season and the playoff games as well. So thanks for tuning in, you guys, and we'll catch you guys in a couple days.